Welcome back to Tabletop Assault. I'm Ross, and today I'm going to give you my first impressions of the Adeptus Custodes Codex, going into quite a bit of depth, looking at all the different changes that we have in the Adeptus Custodes Codex, or should I call it the Talons of the Emperor? There is Sister Silence throughout it now as well. So how this works is I'm going to have a look at the rules in specific, looking at shield hosts, which are very interesting, very different. Then going to have a look at obviously the Warlord traits, stratagems, etc. Then at the end looking at the datasheets, the key ones, and the changes that have been implemented. One thing I won't cover is Crusade rules. Now, mainly because I don't really play Crusade, I'd love to, but again, factor of time, and it is narrative. If you've got any questions, put them into the comments and I will try and get to them as much as possible, simply because that would add another huge amount of time onto this review. I'm mainly sticking to a match play perspective. With that, let's have a look at the Codex. Starting off with my TLDR, really just giving you an idea of a quick overview of what I've seen in the Codex. So in terms of, let's start with the bad stuff, day sheets are not changed that much, which is hardly surprising. You'll probably see more of a, your still dependency on Forge World is still required. Big one here, damage 2 is prevalent and cause massive difficulty when facing forces that cause -1 damage. I've already felt this pain in a test game. It really did make a massive difference, and there is loads of damage too. There's none of these sort of swing damages where you can either be, there's a few damage 1 but not in obvious areas, maybe find that Sister Silence, but there's hardly anything that goes above damage 3 unless you're looking at a Land Raider, and that is a bit of a problem. Many of the rules feel like they've been slightly held back to make sure Custodes are not too powerful. Now, however, I'll say that in an army where you have so few models, being a little bit overpowered is not a bad thing. It should almost feel like every Custode loss is a massive loss. On average, I think the maximum in like a 2000 point battle, you're looking at nearly 40 models maybe, when you're looking at 50 points a model. Take a vehicle and it takes away 3 or 5 of them straight away. I just feel that holding back on them being too powerful might have been a slight mistake on that side. Using Sister Silence to try and buff out the Codex. Now, to explain that, there's 4 new datasheets minus the named character. And they are nice to have. There is much use for them in psychic defense. If you're going to face Thousand Suns, Grey Knights or Demons, then I can see them being hugely useful. But having 3 datasheets seems a bit much to me, because essentially they're almost all the same unit, except for one of them has one small special rule, but they've just got different weapons, and that to me is not too exciting. The good stuff, the shield hosts are good and very useful and will offer a number of different ways to play. They are the biggest change to this codex and I love it. I think it will really open up a bit more sort of Custode playstyle, so really enjoying that and something worth looking into. Relics have been improved. There is no longer, must takes in it. You're not going to be taking Oryx Aquila every time, and you may not be taking Oryx Aquila anymore, dependently. But there are now a few options I'm like, those are quite nice, and I would definitely consider them, rather than before we had so many relics and we just ended up taking Oryx Aquila because it was an auto take. I've never been a fan of auto take relics. I believe that they should be quite well balanced, but I do believe they should be powerful. Martial katas, not as complicated as once thought, but also not so useful. So I just saw them, I was like, what is this? But now that I've played it, it's actually quite useful. Well, it's easy to use, not as useful, but it's something you will get used to. Think of the sort of Necron protocols that they have with their sort of commanders and everything. Kinda how I think of them, like that. They're not so useful that you're going to make your whole game about them, but they are quite useful. But overall, I'd probably say shield hosts are vastly what's going to give you an extra edge in this next edition codex. Detachment abilities and datasheet abilities. These are sort of the ones that you get for using as a detachment for Custodes, so will affect just about every game you play. So Adeptus Custodes detachments gain Emperor's Legion, Hosts of Heroes and Watchers of the Throne abilities, and Adeptus Custodes units gain Shield Host fighting styles. Adeptus Custodes infantry and Anathema Psykana troops, so that's your Sister Silence, gain Obsec. Each Adeptus Custodes model counts as one additional model cumulative with other abilities, so when you're using Obsec they count as 2, which is very useful. Or yeah, they do count as 2. So and Anathema Psykana detachments allows Anathema Psykana troops gain Obsec. So that's just to really say, if you're going to use Psykana detachments where they're just Sister Silence on their own, they also get Obsec as well. So Emperor's Legion cannot include more Athena Psykana troops than Adeptus Custodes troops in a detachment. You cannot include more Athena Psykana HQs than Adeptus Custodes HQs in a detachment. Hosts of Heroes, you can include a maximum of 1 each type of shield captain, so i.e. Guardian, Illyrius or Vertus in a detachment. So no running 2 of the Jetbikes flying about. If you're going to have single detachment, you have to really split those kind of captains apart. And we are seeing this more in the game as we go on, limitations on captains, etc. So I'm not surprised by that one in the slightest. Watcher of the Throne, for the purpose of Lookout Sir, Adeptus Custodes Infantry and Bikers count as 2 models for friendly Adeptus Custodes shield host characters. Another way, just because we've got a small amount of models, just another way for you to really use Lookout Sir more often. And Aegis of the Emperor, models have a 4-up invul and ignore mortal wounds in a 6+. So no more of this. It's a 5-up, really it's a 4-up because we're an Adeptus Custodes detachment. It is now 4-up permanently, which is quite good in some sense. I'm not a big fan of having like heavily armoured armies such as Custodes, which have a 2-up save, having then a 4-up invul save, because there is problems within that, but that's maybe a subject for another video. Simply put, it just means that you'll find a lot of people sometimes just use -1, -2 stuff and laugh away because they've ignored your 4-up invul ability. Daughters of the Abyss units cannot be targeted or affected by psychic powers. Psychic tests taken within 18 inches are -1 for each unit, cumulative to -3. Each time model attacks a psyker or demon unit within 6 inches, add 1 to the wound roll. So important thing to distinct there is that that applies to you as well in terms of the psychic test. It didn't say friendly and it didn't say enemy, it is psychic test taken within 18 inches, so they will affect your allies as well if you have any. So very, very interesting in that, but yeah, they cannot be affected by psychic powers at all. So none of this sort of, Magnus staring at them and causing mortal wounds. I'm sure you could swat them away with his spear, or his sword, but simply put, that is a good way to really hurt very psychic heavy armies. Thousand Sons, Grey Knights, etc. all are going to be very, very hampered by Sister Silence. Even 1 unit will hurt, but the fact it's cumulative is really good. And then they're able to get +1 to the wound, makes the combat variety very interesting to look at. Now we come to the martial kata abilities. Now how this works is if every unit in your army has the Adeptus Custodes keyword, bar Athena Psykana units, Agents of the Imperium and Unaligned, and every unit is of the same shield host, then you may use martial katas. Now after both sides have deployed, but before determining who goes first, choose a primary, secondary and tertiary martial kata. Select one to use in the command phase, that lasts until the next command phase. You cannot select a kata stance more than once, and you must select the primary first and the tertiary must come after the secondary. Once you have moved on to another martial kata, you cannot go back to the previous one. Now there's a big example in the book, you can probably see it there, and it is very good at making it pretty clear how it works. It's not as complicated as you think. Now I'll quickly try and go through these. Callistus is stance 1, roll 3d6 when advancing, discard 1 dice. Fine, it's okay, I'm not bothered by it too much. Stance 2 counts as remaining stationary when moving or advancing. Again, I just don't see us being really bothered by that so much. There's very few reasons why we're bothered about remaining stationary when we've moved in advance. Don't have many heavy weapons, there might be something I'm missing on that one. Conserve can perform action, turn they advance or fell back. That one I actually feel is not too bad. Actions are quite important, so being able to advance and also when you fall back and still perform an action, yeah, not bad. But more importantly is while performing an action you can still shoot. Now obviously if you use any of the Forged units, I forget what they're called, Sagittarium Guard, it's them, you can then still fire them, get them on a point, do an action, maybe raise banners and still fire. So I can see that one being quite useful if you do take Sagittarium Guard. Decatari stance 1, enemy models piling in, consolidation. If it starts in engagement range, must subtract 2 from that move's range. So it just means that your opponent can't maneuver as much if they're in range of you, well, within engagement range. Honestly, I think there will be situations that's useful, but not generally. Each time model fights, it may add 1 to attack characteristic, but reduce damage of melee weapons equipped with to 1. I think that one could see a lot more use on this sort of in this martial kata, mainly because there will come situations where you will need to reduce that damage down to 1. Heck, with the damage 1 modifiers for Death Guard and everything, it would almost be absolutely preferable to get that extra attack. So yeah, very interesting one on that side. I would almost always take stance 2. Salvus, stance 1, add 4 inches to ranged weapons. Very handy for either the first or second turn to really bring you into possibly into range with your weapons, but also within rapid fire range. Yeah, I can see it being quite useful if you want to make that stance 1, so your primary. Start with that. Stance 2 is infantry units do not advance and not in engagement range of an enemy unit. Can shoot twice with auric weapons. Auric weapons, I'm pretty sure, are your sword, spear, and shield. Won't count for your bolters from the Sagittarian guards, but still, it's okay. Would I prefer advance? Add 4 inches to ranged weapons or shoot twice? Personally, I'd go shoot twice. If you're in rapid fire range, that could actually be really, really deadly. Rendex, stance 1, attacks against vehicles or monsters, auto wound and unmodified hit rolls of 6. And then stance 2 is, if a model was charged, performed heroic intervention, makes attack on a vehicle or monster, add 1 to the strength. I mean, that's really going to come down to math, whether you actually need that extra strength to really drive through. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Say you're attacking with axes against a toughness 8 opponent, then yeah, that extra strength is going to be really, really handy to bring you up to strength 9. There's also another stratagem there that if it's tougher than your own unit, you get +1 to wounds. That would turn you from essentially wounding on 4s with both these, you wound them on 2s. So that is very, very useful. The other one with unmodified hit rolls of 6, that's going to be volume of dice is probably going to be the most useful for that, and I don't really know on that one. It really just depends a wee bit. I'm more pushing towards the other one if it comes to... No, sorry. I'm pushing towards the unmodified hit rolls of 6, unless it comes to that strength that is required. It is going to be situational. Capitaris, melee attacks made against this unit cannot be re-rolled. Enemy units attempting to fall back, bar vehicles and monsters, roll off with you, adding 1 to opponent's dice if they fly. If you win, they cannot fall back. Almost tempted to really just go auto stance 2, because just being able to lock your opponent into a 50-50 chance of staying in combat will be very useful versus stopping them from re-rolling. There is some armies that do require the re-roll more than others, so yeah, I could see both being useful. Overall, my thoughts on the Martial Katas is a bit like the Necron command protocols. I think that's the ones that they get if they go all the same legion, is that they're just not that useful. They are useful, there are uses for them, but they're just not like, wow, like Space Marine ones where it's like different forms of AP. They are always going to be more or less useful. I found them really, really good. These, they are so situational, and you've got to decide them before the game, that if you call the wrong situation before the game, you set up your order wrong, it's not going to work out very well. So maybe there is that tactical side you need to be really, really good at to get the most out of them. On to Captain Commander. We saw our first draft of this in War of the Spider, and it was popular, so we are now getting our next go at it. Now, it is very interesting, it has changed slightly, that they are upgrades for Guardian, Illyrius and Vertus Shield Captains. So you get different abilities for each one of them. Either you have it on foot, in Terminator, or riding on a Dawneagle Jetbike. Only one can be used in Combat Patrol / Incursion, or twice in a Strike Force or Onslaught. Each model can only have one Captain Commander ability, and for each model upgraded must use a different Captain Commander ability. Now we'll go into the Guardian Shield Captain model first. This is your standard on-foot Shield Captain. You've got Master of the Stances, which is power level +1. I believe they're all just power level +1. 25 points. In command phase, select a Custodes core or character within 6 inches. Until your next command phase, that unit benefits from both stances. Only usable if whole army is Custodes, bar Athena, agents, or unaligned. Honestly, not that impressed with that one. Having both stances is nice, but again, very, very situational. Swift as Eagle, 15 points, can advance and charge. Really, really good. Might be better on the Dawneagle Jetbike, but can't complain with it. Just gives you that extra couple of inches to move up and hopefully cause some havoc. Inspirational Exemplar, plus 15 points, add 3 inches to range of this model's inspirational fighter ability. I've seen sometimes that's quite useful. More you want to add to all the abilities that they actually have auto effects of, though with Shield Captains it's only really this. So 3 inches not bad, but I don't think I'd pay the points for. Illyrius Shield Captain model upgrades. We have Unstoppable Destroyer, which is 10 points. Compile in, consolidate an additional 1 inch. When this model piles in on or heroically intervenes, it can do so in any direction, even if it's touching another enemy model, as long as it ends in engagement range. Not bad for 10 points. I don't really care about the 1 extra inch, that's like fine, but it does allow you to maybe move into the engagement range you want to be in. There might be a character hiding about. Ultimately, again, not that impressed with this one. Bane of Abominations, which is 15 points. Attacks made against monsters, vehicle or character units, add 1 to wind rolls. Again, situational, you'd like just add 1 to wind rolls, but I feel that would be a few more points than just 15. But it's still very, very useful. Adding to wind rolls is always very useful because there's not many ways to actually change wind rolls versus hit rolls. There's absolutely loads. So yeah, I quite like that one. And then we have Defiant to Last, which is 20 points. If this model lost wounds, but more than half, add 1 to attack characteristic. If this model has half or less wounds than its starting amount, then add 2 attacks. Honestly, I don't like these abilities that activate, unless they activate with like 1 wound and they just auto-activate. These ones you can just enter into a bad situation, get absolutely crumped instantly. Say you're facing the Nightbringer, then he's pretty much going to rip apart because you're going to lose your armor save and your invul save. Not guaranteed kill you, but it'd be pretty close. And simply, yeah, I'm not a big fan of that. Honestly, out of the lot of them, Bane of Abominations seems like the most obvious take. Then we have the Vertus Shield, which is your Dawneagle Jetbike. We have Fierce Conqueror, which is 15 points. When this model is selected to fight after pylon moves, if within 2 inches of 6 or more enemy models, then add 2 to attacks. Pretty good. If you're facing horde units, that's going to be very, very handy. Then we have Ceaseless Hunter, which is 20 points. Models can charge and turn in which fell back. I think that one is a really good one to have because it just allows you to choose your engagements a lot easier. And then we have Tip of the Spear, which is 15 points. When this model attacks in a turn it charged or performed a heroic intervention, then it can reroll hit rolls of 1 and wind rolls of 1. If that was reroll all hits and all wounds, I'd almost take that as an auto take because that'd be fantastic for the wound part, because yes, your spear has changed. But overall, I really like the one where you can fall back when you can charge when you fall back. It just stops you from being tied down by, say, a horde unit or something, and you become less effective. You fall out of engagement and then move on to another one. I think is a lot more useful. So now we come to Shield Toast. Now, we got a taste of this with War of the Spider, and it almost worked almost akin to how Thousand Suns and Death Guard were, which was you got a Stratagem, a Warlord trait, and a Relic when you chose a Shield Toast. But that largely stayed the same for 9th edition Death Guard and Thousand Suns. There was a wee bit of difference between them. But with the Shield Toast, I'd say they're much more important because you also get traits with them, which adds on some unique abilities which can be very, very good. So, if every unit in a Custodian's detachment shares the same Shield Host keywords, they gain access to the Shield Host fighting style, Warlord traits, Stratagems, and Relics. A Shield Host fighting style gives your units 2 traits, and each Shield Host lists a kata, which once in a battle they may use both stances at once. This does not prevent you from using the stance you did not elect to use this round in a following round, but you can use both in a single round once. So I think how that works is that each kata kind of has 2 stances. If the one that you are proficient in with your Shield Host, you then choose one of the stances. I'm going to go with, say, stance 2, but I'm going to elect to have stance 1 activate in this battle round at the same time. So you have both of them activated, and then later on in the next battle round you can go, right, I'm just going to have stance 1 activated, but you can no longer have stance 2. That is my read of that one when you activate both at the same time, because that is your sort of proficient Shield Host kata. So let's go into each of these individually. Now they are very important to choose. So Emperor's Chosen, Shield Host fighting style is Magna Imperator, I think that's right, yep, and their martial kata is Rendex. The first trait they get is each time this unit shoots or fights it can reroll 1 hit or wound roll, and their second trait is 4 up, ignore wounds when suffering damage to a mortal wound. Now that's very, very important because I think against psychic heavy armies, if you're not taking Sister Silence, this will give you a lot of defense against their smites. Usually you'd get a 6 up ignore wounds, this gives you a 4 up, which is very, very useful in defensive position. And that reroll 1 hit or wounds quite nice because you're probably going to hit on 2s with most things. Maybe there's a -1 to hit, but still hit on 2s means there might be a miss or so, but getting that extra 1 in could be helpful. Their stratagem, Esteemed Amalgam, 1 command point, using the command phase, selects one Emperor's Chosen unit. This unit can use one of the other shield host fighting styles until the start of the next command phase. Don't really like this. I get it's useful, but it's like saying, oh, I've got this unit, I need it to benefit from another shield host ability. Just should have gone that. Shield host maybe. I know that in game you might have these sudden swings where you need to change over, but it's a bit of an odd one, but I suppose it's very cheap at 1 command point. Warlord trait, Auric Exemplar. When this Warlord fights, after resolving all their attacks, you may attack with an additional amount of attacks equal to the models destroyed, to a maximum of 4. Holy moly, that's a cool Warlord trait. It's a shame that most of the damage you do is only 2, but if you are fighting hordes, then yeah, you're pretty much going to get that extra 4 attacks, so really cool. I quite like it. Is it better than some of the other Warlord traits? It is debatable, but you know, it's nice to see you can get easy access to 4 extra attacks if you are fighting hordes or if you do manage to clear off a few units, so yeah, quite like it. And Relic is Paragon Spear, replaces Guardian Spear, range 24, rapid fire 1, strength 5, AP -1, 2 damage when it's firing, and in melee it is strength +3, AP -5, and 2 damage. So this is a bit of a fine weapon. I mean, I have a big problem with Guardian Spear, and I'll probably talk about that in the Custodian Guard part, because you see all the weapons kind of there. And I think it's a massive wasted opportunity, but in terms of Relic, it is fine. It's probably not my ideal one, but it's quite strong. It really does upgrade that Guardian Spear to a massive AP and also get into strength 8. But part of me would just take an axe, though maybe only, I think, AP -2. It is good, I can see the uses of it, but overall, I just think the spears in general were a bit of a wasted opportunity, but I'll get into that later. Second shield host is Shadow Keepers, which is a fan favourite. Their shield host fighting style is Wardens of the Dark Cells, and their martial kata is Capitaris. So the first trait is enemy units within engagement range of Shadow Keeper units subtract 1 to attack characteristics, and there is no limit on this. I know there's big things saying, oh, you know, if they don't put in bracket to a minimum of 1, etc., that counts as 0. I don't know if they've FAQ'd it, I'm pretty sure they have, because they've got to have FAQ'd it, because otherwise that means you're going to force people who only have like 1 attack characteristics to have 0 attacks. So no, I just don't see that being the case. Some people are going to argue it, fine, but I'm pretty sure it must be FAQ'd somewhere and I haven't seen it. But yeah, that could be a really good ability. That really works quite well in combat. And trait 2, models can reroll wounds against characters, which again, if you're going against a character heavy army, that would be very tempting to take. Now, it's a bit situational, there's not too many characters about sort of character heavy armies, but I know there is some. You know, you might see a demon army that uses too many greater demons, in which case these guys are going to go absolutely to town on them. So I can see some uses there. Their stratagem is Grin Responsibility, which is 1 command point. Use a stratagem in any phase when a Shadow Keeper unit is selected as a target of an attack, except vehicles. Until the end of the phase, subtract 1 from strengths of attacks made against this unit. Again, a bit situational. I would prefer it being like -1 to wound or something, but maybe that would have been 2 command points. 1 command point, not so bad, but really, you know, it depends what's firing at you. Unless it's something like, say, strength 5, 6 or 10, I just don't see it being the most beneficial use, because 5 would reduce most things to wounding on, say, you know, down to 5s, if strength 5 to 4, 6 to 5, and then 10 to 9. So I think it's useful, but you know, 1 command point, but part of me would have been preferring it to be -1 to wounds. Warlord trait, Lock Warden. When the Warlord attacks a character unit, invul saves cannot be made. Absolutely fantastic. Part of me would wish it was just ignore invuls or something. I mean, we're only putting out 2 damage with a lot of our weapons, but you know, you see other characters like the Nightbringer, which again is a special character, but this is very situational in just characters. And again, that's a Shadow Keepers thing, to sometimes hunt down these big characters and stuff, but it just annoys me to a small extent. But still, again, very thematic. Relic Stasis Obliter. Select an enemy unit with an engagement range of the bearer. That unit cannot fight till all units in your army fight first. Very useful. Allowing, you know, a unit to really get slowed down by that can be very handy, and I believe it would override the fight first due to charging, because the unit cannot fight until your army fights first. I don't know if it overrides. I'm 90% sure that is the case, just the way it works in that one. You can let me know on that. But yeah, a very powerful relic. Not my favourite shield host, but again, I can see its uses. Dread Host next, personal favourite of mine. I think I used it quite a lot when War of the Spider came out. So, Shield Host fighting style, instruments of the Emperor's Wrath, and their martial kata is the Katari. So trait 1 is attacks made by this unit to targets within 9 inches improve AP of attacks by 1, and units can reroll charges. Now that reroll charges alone is excellent, but also having an ability that improves your AP by 1 within 9 inches is also very, very nice as well. Very handy on axes, because I think that brings you up to AP minus 3 in combat, which is very, very good. Even in rapid fire, I think this also, well, not in really in rapid fire, if you are within 9 inches, because I believe it affects ranged as well, means you're going to be even more deadly there as well. So I really like both their traits, really think they work well, especially if you're doing any deep striking, which is, or coming in from Golden Light I guess, which is a big Dread Host thing. Then getting that reroll charge is absolutely vital. I think it's a really good one and personal favourite. Stratagem, Golden Light of the Myrmidons, 2 command points used in the movement phase when you set up a unit from Golden Light. Till the start of your next turn, subtract 1 from hit rolls that target this unit. When this unit declares a charge, the targeted unit cannot declare Overwatch or set to defend against that charge. I'm not a huge fan of this one, mainly for the fact is subtract 1 to hit from that unit, fine, but the unit you're going to charge is probably going to be vulnerable and you hope to really do damage on it, so I just don't see it really being big on that subtract 1. Maybe it's in your opponent's shooting phase next turn, they might try and bring you down because you might be in their lines and causing a bunch of havoc, so it might be useful there. And not being over to Overwatch, well, I suppose that'll be important. You know, Overwatch and set defend are not as important as they were in 8th edition, but then again we might see that when the Tau Codex comes out, that might all change. Warlord trait, All-Seeing Annihilator. In your command phase, select either this Warlord or friendly Dread Host core unit within 6 inches. Till next command phase, selected units attacks with unmodified hit rolls of 6, score an additional hit. Now this could be very good. I'll let you know that core units, yep, the Terminators and the Bikes are both core. So that is very nice to see. You can select that unit and then any unmodified hit rolls of 6s or an additional hit. The problem is Custodes, you don't tend to be volume of hits, more quality of hits, minus your damage. So you might only get 2 maybe additional hits, possibly, depending on that one, if it's unmodified roll 6. It's okay. It would be certainly a Warlord trait I would consider. Relic is Stasis Admon Mortis? Sure. Replacement for Castellan Axe, range 24, rapid fire 1, strength 5, AP minus 1, 2 damage when firing, and its melee capabilities are plus 3 strength, AP minus 3 and 3 damage. The important part of that one is that it's AP minus 3, which in essence, if you're in combat, is probably AP minus 4 due to their traits, and damage 3, one of the few damage 3 weapons in this army, which I think is tragic, but still having that damage 3 is very important. Certainly makes them, you know, the actual unit a lot more viable. There is some really good relics though, because that is for the axe, which you mainly see on the Terminator one, and there's some really good relics. We'll go into that one later on. But yeah, I really like the Dread Host. I love the reroll charge. I really like the extra AP, so I could see that one being quite good for very aggressive armies. Aquilian Shield next, so their Shield Host fighting style is Gilded Guardians, martial kata is Salvus. So the first trait is core units with this trait can heroically intervene. Bit messy, if you are very tactically minded that can actually be amazing. So yeah, it can be very good. I've seen it, I think with Space Wolf players can do something like this and it is quite good. Again, very tactical minded sort of that one, but not bad. But the second trait is units treat AP minus 1 as 0. Now why is that good? Now a big thing I ran about this a lot, but I should do a video on it, is invul saves on very armoured armies. So for instance, Custodes, we have 2 up save and then we have a 4 up invul save. So we only see the effect of the invul save if we're hit by AP 3 or better, because AP minus 1 and 2 would just still bring us to our usual one. Now why is it maybe interesting on this side? And I would argue maybe Custodes should either be minus 1 AP as a whole, as in the AP strength should be reduced by 1. I think that would be a really good thing to keep the survivability of AP minus 1 and 2 proficient weapons. See them loaded with Necrons, I think Tau, Space Marine, you're going to see loads of them. I'd really like it, so you could just ignore that. Now these guys essentially do that, which helps a lot, but if you give them shields, you're also adding +1 to your armor save. So say if you give them a shield, you'd have a 1-up save, which an AP -1 would still be applied to 1-up, and then even if they had a shield, that means you're essentially going back up, I think, to your 2-up save? No, I think you'd be going to your 3-up save, but that would still be very good with the shields. You're ignoring the 1s, and then on the 3s, on the AP -1s you're ignoring it, getting your 2-up save, and AP -2 you're still getting a 3-up save, versus everything else should be 3-up and 4-up save. So the amount of survivability is very interesting on that side there. And in general, I think shields are going to see a massive comeback, mainly because, well, I think they're already very useful, but I think with this one, you're really strong contender to see that, you know, you ignore the AP -1, then you put the shields on there as well, and then your AP -2s are only going to your 3-up saves. Very interesting. Sorry to rant about that a wee bit. Just in terms of survivability, that is very key for Custodes, and so I'm very intrigued by that one in terms of using it with shields might be very good. Shield of Honour, 1 command point. Using your opponent's shooting phase, select an Imperium infantry character within 6 inches from your army. To the end of the phase, that unit cannot be selected by ranged attacks while within 6 inches of an equivalent host core unit. Honestly, I don't care about that one too much. It's an infantry character, so if you could do it to defend, I don't know, Lehman Russes, it might be hilarious, but again, not one that I'm really wild on. Warlord trait is Revered Companion, half the damage suffered to your Warlord rounding up. Fantastic. I really wish that was more of a predominant Warlord trait, because then it just added more survivability to, let's face it, your bike. And then Relic Psykana does not replace Presidium Shield, so you gain the effect of that shield, subtract 1 to wound rolls against the bearer. So it doesn't say replace Presidium Shield, it is models equipped with it, so you get that +1 to your armor save and subtract 1 to wound rolls against the bearer. Very nice. I personally prefer, when it comes to shield captains, more taking the Terminator and the bike, but honestly that's pretty good as well, so I'd be very tempted. On to the Solar Watch. Now these are a fan favourite, the white Custodes, I think, but not a favourite of mine. I prefer my Custodes black or gold, but hey, let's see how they work on the field. Shield host fighting style is Talon Sortie, and their martial kata is Callistus. Now the first trait is add 1 to advance rolls. If you have Implacable Vanguard, then add 7. So I believe Impeccable Vanguard is the bike ability, that if you advance bikes you automatically get 6. Now it goes up to 7. Honestly, not a big fan of that. I never really advanced with the bikes in the first place because they move so much. They've got great firepower and charging, so with them not so much. With other units it's possible, but again with Custodes you're not really about advancing, you're about probably slowly moving up and then trying to get some charges in. So not the biggest fan of that one. Units can charge in a turn they fell back. A lot better. Now it's a bit more defensive on that side, it's assuming that you have been charged, then you maybe want to fall back and move into a better charging opponent, or maybe you just want to be able to recharge and then you're going to be striking first a lot more. Again, it's a bit more of a reactionary ability, not my favourite, but I think there is going to be massive times when that is very usable. Stratagem is the Eagle Strike, 1 command point. Using a phase and an enemy warlord destroyed by Solar Watch units in your army. To the end of the battle, -1 from combat attrition tests for enemy units. Very good in some ways, because that is army-wide debuff, but morale is still not one of the strongest things in the game. There's many ways that people can either ignore it or not really worry about it, so it's not my favourite ability, but it's cheap at 1 command point. Warlord trait is Sally Forth, used at the start of the charge phase. Select a friendly solar infantry unit within 6 inches. Till the end of the phase, that unit can charge even though they advanced. Now this would have been amazing if you could use it with bikes. Can you imagine? They'd move 14, advance 7, and then if your say your warlord was on a bike going with them, they'd just be basically like, you boys, you go and charge, and then you'd be charging on top of it. It'd be insane. On infantry, it's not as wild, but it can be useful. I just think it's very situational on that side, but still, it's one worth considering. Then we have the Relic, the Swift Silver Talon, replacement for Guardian Spear. The bearer can shoot and charge in a turn it fell back. Range 24, Rapid Fire 1, Strength 4, -2 AP and 2 damage. Melee, Strength +2, AP -4, 2 damage. Rubbish. So we already get with their trait to fall back and charge, so why is that part of it? It basically is allowing you to fall back and shoot, because that's essentially what it's doing. Some of the stats are slightly better, but in no real meaningful way in my opinion. Could be completely wrong, let me know. but I think that one was maybe, you know, oh wow, this really allows you to fall back, shoot and charge. You already get 50% of that already, so being able to shoot with that rapid fire one weapon, which is fine, nah, not a great relic. I think there's better ones to consider. Lastly, we come to the Emissaries Imperiatus. Now, as you can see, this is going to be one of the longest ones to describe. Their shield host fighting style is Heralds of the Throne, and their martial kata is Conserve. Trait 1, this unit can fight first, which is usually now quite a useful ability. You know, you find that in protracted combats that can be very useful, but also when receiving charges, so yeah, can be quite useful. Trait 2, this unit can ignore hit or wound modifiers. That can be very useful for armies that you do find a lot of that. I think Craft Worlds do have they have loads of to hit modifiers, and I think they have a few wound modifiers as well. So the fact that you can means that you can still buff your guys up in terms of hit and wound ones, and if you decide, no, there's too many minuses, just ignore them. So that can be very, very useful. Stratagem Into the Darkness, 2/3 command points. Used at the start of the first battle round before the first turn begins. Select a core unit from your army and make a normal move as if it were the movement phase. Must end more than 9 inches away from your opponent's models. If both players have this ability, whoever has first turn goes first. 1/3 models in the unit cost 2 command points, otherwise 3 can only be used once. And once is probably enough because it says core and the bikes are core, so that means you could essentially launch your bikes up 14 inches, and then if you get turn 1 you can then launch them a further 14 inches and charge. I think that is the case, I could be wrong in that one, but it's just saying core and they are core, that's not saying infantry, so that could be quite good if you want to launch a absolute monumental unit of bikes straight down the field. So I like it. That is a very useful stratagem. Very expensive, but could be very good to do an amazing alpha strike. Warlord trait is Voice of the Emperor. That's a bit of a confusing one. Add 3 to the Warlord's aura abilities, so keep that in mind. Also gains Voice of the Emperor, which is an aura ability, while a friendly Adeptus Custodes or Athena Psykana units within 9 inches of this model, add 1 to leadership of models in this unit. Note this ability already has the 3 inches added to make 9. So the second part is rubbish, because your Adeptus Custodes are like leadership 9, they're braver than robots. So that's really not going to apply, and then the Athena Psykana, sure they're quite brave and it might help them, but really don't care about that. It's mainly a Warlord trait that's adding 3 to your Warlord aura abilities, which is fine, but again not the biggest thing in the world I consider. Now the second part of that is a relic, which is the Halo of the Torchbearer, and bearer gains Halo of the Torchbearer, which is another aura ability. While a friendly Emissaries Imperiatus unit is within 3 inches of this model, it can ignore any or all modifiers to move characteristics or advance and charge rolls. At the start of the fight phase, roll a d6 for each enemy unit within 3 inches, and on a 3+, that unit suffers a mortal wound, and D3 mortal wounds if the target's leadership is less than 7, or 7 or less. Again, not one I'm a big fan of. Now, yeah, there is a few things that can modify move characteristics. I know that there is the Thunderfire cannons for Space Marines, which can be a problem on that side. Yeah, there is reasons to take this one if you want your Warlord to, the Relic Bearer to really sort of avoid these things. But again, very, very situational. You don't find many armies that do have movement modifiers. They do happen, and they are very powerful. Maybe in the tournament scene you might see this more often. But again, it's one that I know armies when I'm going to be facing that, and yeah, I will be a bit more cautious and considerate. Now the second part, to cause the mortal wounds, fine, not many mortal wounds. If your opponent's playing multiple small units, then yeah, this will be really good. There's not many things with leadership 7 or less. You might kill a few more guards or something, which is fine. But yeah, overall, fine relic, but not one of the ones I'm most excited about. Stratagems. So, if you've looked at the Warhammer community, some people have been a little bit disappointed with these. Some that have been highlighted have been more or less copy and pasted from the Space Marine Codex and seem a little bit too familiar. And I would agree with that sentiment. When I got the Codex, I agreed with that a lot. And there are a wee bit in terms of the stratagems. I'd say overall there are more useful ones, but there's also some key ones missing, which I think is very, very damaging. One thing to mention as well is I am not going to cover every single stratagem. You should be able to see every single stratagem with the pictures I've taken, but I'm not going to talk about them in detail. I'm really just going to highlight the main ones that I have seen. So firstly, Arcane Genetic Alchemy, which is 1/2 command points. Use this in any phase when a Custodes unit from your army, except vehicles, is selected as a target of an attack. Unmodified wound rolls of 1-3 fail. 3 or fewer models, 1 command point, otherwise 2 command points. You know what, you love it. It is a bit of a staple these days. You see in Space Marines, it works really well for Custodes. Slayers of Nightmare, which is 1/2 command points. Use in a fight phase when a Custodes unit is selected to fight. If a model in that unit makes an attack against a unit with a higher toughness, then add 1 to 2 wound rolls. If the unit selected for this stratagem is 3 or less, then 1 command point, otherwise 2 command points. Not as easy as, say, Wrath of the Wronged, which is from Thousand Suns, which was, I forget which one it was in Chaos Space Marines, but essentially just got a straight up +1 to the wound rolls and it was 1 command point. Wrath of the Wronged in Thousand Suns turned into 2. And now we've got this one for Slayer's Nightmare where you have to be fighting something that is essentially tougher than you. It's not really hard to pull off. If you are fighting something that is tougher, say usually something in the region of 6, 7 or 8 when it comes to Custodes, yeah, this is going to be super useful. I like it. Anything that advances wound rolls is good, just it seems to be a little bit more steps, but then again, if you've got a small enough unit, you might only be paying 1 command point, so it is quite useful. Purgation Sweep, which is 1 command point, use when Witch Seeker unit shoots or overwatches until the end of the phase, add 1 to Strength of the Flamers. Almost your average Flamer with AP -1, that's what they're armed with. They're 14 points a model, and a squad of these that, if you use this stratagem, they become Strength 5. Yeah, I could see them doing quite a bit of damage, so not very expensive, a handy wee Flamer squad. Yeah, I think that'd be not bad. Only thing to mention is they are fast attack choice, they're not a troop choice. Vigil Unending, which is 2 command points. Used in the fight phase when Adeptus Custodes capture is destroyed before it has a chance to fight. It may fight after the attacker unit is finished fighting, then remove the slain character. Situational at best, and I hate stratagems that really go, oh, you've died, then you get a shot hurting back. You know, really not one of the ones I like. And at 2 command points, you've already suffered by losing a character in itself. It's one to keep in mind though, because Custodes characters can do a bit of damage when they do fight back, so it is worth considering, because it might be the case of you just need to cause like a few wounds to bring down another character, so it is worth keeping in mind. Retribution of the Machine Spirit, 1 command point. Oh, you guessed it, this is the Land Raider one. If only they should have just made this like any vehicle that basically can, if it's been bracketed, can become full efficiency. That really targets some of the Forge World stuff, and it would be very useful, but no, they have to think about the Land Raider. Earning a name, 1 command point, used when a Custodes character, excluding named characters, slays an enemy character. Resolve either of the following. Gain 1 trait from a shield host fighting style you do not have. Select 1 stance of a martial kata. You benefit from the chosen ability for the rest of the game. Can only be used on each character once, cannot be used in crusade battles. Really nice benefit. If you do it out, you're going to promote your character, you're going to get a new shield host ability, which is kind of what I would favour too. Now, I don't believe it is you get the shield host ability, you get one of the traits, not both. Or you can go for a martial kata ability, and ultimately I would more lean towards a shield host ability. I think there's a few stronger ones you can choose from there. Victor of the Blood Games has changed a wee bit. It is 2 command points still. Used before the battle after you determine a Warlord trait for your Custodes character, you can generate another, must be unique, and can only be used once. Very different to before, but is actually really useful. There's 2 traits which, if you're going down the survivability route, do work very well together, but this is one that I can see a lot of people taking before the game, really to buff up one of your characters. So yeah, it is very different, but still very viable. If there was anything, I would have loved the old Victor of the Blood Games, and this is another one, then you'd have a crazily good character. Eternal Penitent, which is 1 command point, used before a battle, select a Custodes Dreadnought from your army, gains 1 attack, can reroll charge. If it already can then reroll charge, just add 1 to the charge roll, can only be used once. If you have a Combat Dread that cannot reroll already, now I know, I think it's the... Is it the Dread Host? I want to say it's the Dread Host that can re-roll the charges already. Correct me if I'm wrong in that one, but I think it is. Then yeah, this is pretty damn good. You're going to have to use it, because 1 command point giving your Dreadnought always re-rolling and an extra attack, really good. If you are Dread Host and you're re-rolling already, it's debatably good, but it's cheap at 1 command point. Fraternity of Heroes, 1 command point. Using a heroic intervention step in opponent's charge phase, one unit in your army can heroically intervene. If it already could, then it can essentially intervene 6 inches. Not bad, but guess what? This sort of replaces your swooping dive. Yeah, swooping dive is gone, and that is not good. Yeah, take that as you will, because that's going to annoy quite a few people. Indomitable Guardians, 1 command point. Used in the fight phase after an enemy unit has fought. Select a Custodes unit in range of an objective marker. They can fight. So another way to fight next, and importance of objectives. You know, the importance of objectives in this edition makes this far more viable to pull off. It's a handy one. I quite like it. It's 1 command point cheap to do an interruption. So yeah, quite good. Unleash the Lions, 1/2 command points. Using your command phase, select one Aleya Custodes unit. Until the end of the battle, each model in that unit becomes its own unit. 3 or fewer models in the unit is 1 command point, otherwise it is 2. A very popular stratagem, and really does hamper your opponents by spreading out all the priorities and the targets and allows you to move in different directions. I've been notoriously terrible at using this one, even though it's one of those stratagems you can sort of use quite easily. But if you deep strike, say, turn 2 and then turn 3, you use your command phase to split apart, it's really going to be a headache to your opponent for those last couple of turns. Well, turn 3, 4, 5, unless you try and walk them across the field, so then you can do it turn 2 or even turn 1. But yeah, you see my point. This was a very popular stratagem, and I can see why it returned. So excellent to see its return, unlike some other stratagems. Desperation's Price, 1 command point. Using your opponent's psychic phase when an enemy unit within 18 inches of a Psykana infantry unit suffers or perils, they suffer an additional D3 mortal wounds. So very useful against Psyker heavy armies, though D3 mortal wounds seems a little bit low, but this can be the difference of a character absolutely exploding, or say if it was like a 1000 Suns unit, the Psyker explodes and causes more damage. It could be really useful, so for 1 command point, again situational, but definitely one to bear in mind. The Emperor's Auspice, 1/2 command points. Using any phase when a Custodes unit is chosen as the target of an attack. Till the end of the phase, units cannot reroll hit, wound, damage results against this unit. 4 or less models, 1 command point, otherwise it's 2 command points. Bit of an odd one that's like 4 or less models, and other stratagems and everything's usually 3 or less, but fair enough. Just another way to protect your units, you know, if there's like a big base of Space Marines. I know David does a lot with Imperial Fists that are re-rolling everything. You know, usually has someone with a relic that allows reroll wound rolls of 1, so he's rerolling hits and wounds of 1, and it's usually with the Plasma Hellblasters. So yeah, it could be a very handy one to go, haha, you know, you're not going to get your rerolls there. Actually, I will need to keep that one in mind. So yeah, it could be very, very useful for against an opponent who relies on rerolls a lot. From Golden Light they come, which is 1 command point. A Custodes infantry, biker, or dread can be put, you know, gains Golden Light. A slight change in the wording means it's actually cheaper to put multiple ones in, because I believe that you can just, I think the previous one it was 1 command point or 3, and it was 1 for 1 unit, 3 for 2 units. Now it's just straight up 1 command point, and you can do it as many times as you need to. So yeah, pretty good on that one. Empiric Severance, which is 1 command point, used in the opponent's psychic phase when an enemy psyker passed a psychic test within 18 inches of a Psykana infantry. 4+ psychic ability is denied. You roll a d6 and a 4+ is denied. An oldie, but always useful as psychic defense. You see that, I think you see it in Sister of Battle, you see it for World Eaters, or at least in Chaos when they have, I think, some Khorne Berserkers or World Eaters. Yeah, it's one of those stratagems we've seen for years, and it is useful. So again, Sister Silence as a psychic defense is very, very good. And last lot of stratagems, we have Creeping Death for 1 command point. Used at the start of any phase, select 1 Psykana infantry unit, give it 6-inch aura that reduces enemy hit rolls by 1 until the end of the phase. Could be useful, especially if you get a unit close to a castle unit, then yeah, you're going to do a lot of, you know, -1 to hits, so that could be good. Tanglefoot Grenades, which is 1 command point. Use at the start of the opponent's movement or charge phase, select an enemy unit, excluding ones that fly, within 12 inches of a Custodes infantry unit and roll a d6. Subtract that d6 from their movement or charge move. Can only be used once per turn. Very useful ability from the previous edition, happy to see it back. I used it plenty of times to hamper, I think it was Space Wolves in a game. I just kept tangle-footing them with like 1 Custodian, and it really stopped the charge coming at me every turn. Very, very useful, very, very cheap, very happy with it. So overall, stratagems as a whole have improved in the sense that I think there was many redundant ones in the Codex. War of the Spider really added some good ones in there, but the Custodes had some really redundant ones. However, mainstay ones like Swooping Dive and Automite and Adamantium are gone, which really cripples these units. I can't for the life of me work out why. Now, usually I prefer generic abilities for them to help, you know. Sometimes I don't like these ones that are super focused on a unit. But with Swooping Dives and Automite and Adamantium were so useful for the unit to make them so much better, and I'm devastated to see them lost. If they end up doing a supplement Codex and they end up in there, or one of them ends up in there, I will be raging. But yeah, both of them are lost, and I think that is going to really annoy a few people. When it comes to the Warlord traits, we do have two different sets, one for Custodes and one for Psykana. So for the Warlord traits for Custodes, I'm going to highlight some of the ones I think are the best here, and they are Master of Martial Strategy. Whilst your Warlord is on the field, refund your command points on a 5+. Once per battle, you can switch the order of your primary, secondary, and tertiary martial kata. In theory, 1/3 of your command points back, which is pretty good, though a few of them I imagine you will be spending pre-game, so you don't get to refund them. Also, switching your martial kata order, I can see actually being really useful, so there is something in that one, though. I mean, you might need to FAQ this one slightly. What if you use your primary one and then try and switch it with your secondary, but you also can't use one that you used previously? It mainly seems like an ability to maybe switch around your secondary and your tertiary one is probably the only way that I think it's going to be usable, but might need a bit of clarification on this just to confirm that you can or can't do so. The other ones I would highlight is Superior Creation, which is 5+ ignore wounds on Warlord, and Radiant Mantle, which is subtract 1 to hit rolls on your Warlord. Now both of these are very nice. On a Warlord with Victor of the Blood Games, which gives you 2 Warlord traits on a single Warlord, that creates up a bit of a tanky Warlord. -1 to hit, 5+ ignore, yeah, really nice. A few other tricks that you might be able to pull off with it, and yeah, you've got quite a nice survivable Custodes Warlord. And then the Psykana traits. Now there's a few less of them, but there is some not bad ones here. So we have Silent Judge, which is a 3-inch aura. Enemy units subtract 1 from combat attrition tests. They also lose OBSEC. This could be really useful for the latter part. Losing OBSEC really annoy a few units. So maybe you go in with some of your Sister Silence troops that do have OBSEC, or maybe some of your Custodes that do have OBSEC, and you're going to secure the area. So that is quite good. And then Mistress of Persecution, which is 6-inch aura that when friendly Psykana infantry makes an attack, the target does not receive the benefits of heavy or light cover, also adding 3 inches to ranged weapons for Psykana infantry. Now I really like this, it makes those flamers 15 inches, ignoring heavy and light cover, and well, you might want to consider these in a Rhino, pile up forward, and really just try and get some loads and loads of auto hits. So quite like that one, I think that is quite tempting. Now to note in terms of the Warlord traits for the special characters, Aleya's trait is Oblivion Knight, Trajann Valoris is his champion to the Imperium / Master of Martial Strategy. Note there is a catch here, which I'll talk about when we get to him. And then Valerian, yep, Peerless Warrior. When it comes to the relics, we do have 2 different sets, one for Custodes and one for Psykana. Now again, I'm only going to highlight the ones that I really thought stood out to me quite a wee bit. So we've got Oryx Aquila, which is biker model only. You can reroll charge rolls. If you already do so, you add 1 to the charge roll. In the movement phase, you can boost, which basically doubles your movement, but you cannot shoot or charge. Slight nerf, because let's face it, you are going to still have your 4-up in build, but you're not going to have your 3-up. But maybe not a bad thing, because beforehand it was a massive auto take, and I really don't like auto take relics, so maybe reducing it a wee bit is handy. But having that reroll charge in case you don't take the, I forget which one it is, but one of the shield tools that does give you reroll charge rolls, then this is very handy for bikes. Then we have Obliteratum, which replaces the Ballistus Grenade Launcher. Now this has been improved, it's now range 18, Assault 1, Strength 10, AP -4 and Damage D3 +3. Big upgrade in that one, longer range, much more reliable, higher damage. Again, if you're taking a Terminator Shield Captain, this is almost an auto take in terms of just how go in and then just do a bit of damage to them. But there is something else worth considering. We also have the Praetorian plate, which is Terminator model only, so that sort of conflicts with the Obliteratum. This adds 1 to your toughness, but once per battle in the heroic intervention of your opponent's charge phase, if the bearer is not within engagement range of an enemy unit, remove them from the field and set up 3 inches of a friendly unit, except vehicles, and within engagement range of an enemy unit. If you cannot achieve both, you cannot do this, and you cannot heroically intervene later that phase. That is awesome if I've read that completely right. You've been able to shunt essentially straight into combat, maybe go into an emergency area that needs a bit more support. In you go. I really like that. That is maybe too good considering you could just get straight into combat. So yeah, just being able to redeploy, but redeploy into combat, crazy good. I wonder if it really can. I suppose it counts a heroic intervention in a way because that allows you to attack. I'm not too sure, but yeah, I suppose if you're allowed to be in engagement range, you're allowed to attack. So yeah, pretty darn good on that one. I could see that being used quite a lot if you're going to use an hilarious Terminator Shields Captain. And then we have the Psykana relics. 2 of them really stand out to me. This is the Excruciatus Flamer, replace the Witch Seeker Flamer, attacks auto hit, range 12, assault 6, strength 6, AP -3 and damage 1. Really nice upgrades, possibly with Mistress Persecution Warlord trait, it'd be really good. Having that solid assault 6 hits, so you don't need to roll for them, and then strength 6, AP -3, solid upgrades. If it was damage 2, I'd almost call it an auto take. You take your HQ with this flamer, and then you take a unit of flamers and a rhino, and then just put them out there. They could be a little bit of a pain, and they'd actually be quite affordable as well. Alas, maybe it's best it's not an auto take being 2 damage. I think the upgrades on it actually are very good. Then we have the enhanced Void Sheen Cloak. The bearer gains 4 up invul, and also subtracts 1 from hit and wound rolls against it. Now, if this could be a Custodes relic, it'd be almost an auto take, because that is an incredible ability to have -1 to hit and 2 wounds. It would really put up their survivability, but alas, that is not the case. Both, I think, really solid relics if you do decide to go down the Psykana route. Chapter approved rules for those looking for different ways to score your secondary objectives. So we have a No Mercy No Respite, Might of Terror, score 4 victory points at the end of the battle round if 1 or more enemy units were destroyed this battle round, and no Adeptus Custodes or Athena Psykana units from your army were destroyed this battle round. Now, that's a bit more of a difficult one. I do usually find, to make sure that you, 1, destroy an opponent's unit, that's not considered very difficult, but equally you've got to consider on our side is that unless you're really thinking about survivability, it can be really hard for you to actually keep one of your units alive. I think you have to play very careful on that one. If you are going the trait that is -1 AP counts as 0, and maybe you've got lots of shields, then yeah, if you play very defensively, that can rack up points very quickly. But it's one of those ones that your opponent can go, oh, you're going to score 4 victory points if I don't just delete at least 1 unit, then they'll probably just try and delete at least 1 unit to guarantee you're not going to get those 4 victory points. It's a bit of an odd one. It's not one I'm personally favourite of, but if you are completely really hard to move defensive style, then yeah, it could be okay. Battlefield Supremacy, stand vigil, score 3 victory points at the end of the battle round if you control more objective markers that are not within either player's deployment zone than your opponent does. That could be an easy one to score, pretty tricky on the first battle round, but essentially if there's 4, usually you'd find that in some matches you have 4 objective markers in midfields, so they're not in your deployment zone, then yeah, you just need to be able to at least control 2 of them, and then make sure your opponent's not controlling the other 2. It's again okay, but for you to get maximum points in that one, you really need to be very careful. So I'm again not the biggest fan of it. And then this one is absolutely crazy. Purge the enemy, Oryx Mortalis. If you select this objective, then before the battle you must select 1 unit from your opponent's army that has the Primarch or Supreme Commander keyword to be marked for death. If no such unit exists, the highest point unit in your opponent's army that is not an aircraft is used. So 5 victory points if that unit is destroyed. Cool. 5 victory points if that unit is destroyed by Adeptus Custodes / Athena Psykana unit from your army and melee. Also cool. There may be a case of you're just going to fire salvo launchers at it for days, but again, cool. 5 victory points if both are true and the unit selected was destroyed more than 6 inches from your deployment zone. Depends how aggressive your opponent is. If it's something like, you know, Mortarion coming at you, I mean, he's a wee bit slow, but he is actually very, very fast, so trying to get him in the midfield, you could score a lot of victory points there. But this is the critical part. -2 victory points for each unit your army that unit destroys. Ouch! If you fail to destroy that unit, and it manages to wipe out, let's say, 3 or 4 units, that could be 6 to 8 victory points you lose rather than earn. So, very, very risky on that one. I like it. You better know what you're doing on that one. Essentially, if it manages to wipe out 3 units and you take it out by shooting, then you're still going to lose points on that side because you didn't manage to kill in melee, which discounts the other one as well. Very, very interesting ones. I don't know how I feel about them compared to some other ones. I think they're okay, but again, when it comes to secondary objectives, people just design their army and know which ones they want to try to score. Especially a lot of mobility armies know exactly what they're going for, and although this isn't a mobility army, you get my point in that you know what your army is going to do. Some of these might help, but it really, really depends on that side. None of them scream out, take it, but yeah, I just thought I would cover them, see what people think. Am I wrong in them on these? Let me know. We're now going on to the data sheet, so we're coming to the end of this. Now, there is going to be some we're not going to cover, mainly because these are already covered in Shadow Throne, and you've probably seen these already. So we've got Shield Captain in Illyrius Terminator Armour, covered in Shadow Throne, Blade Champion, covered in Shadow Throne, Prosecutors, covered in Shadow Throne, Illyrius Custodians, covered in Shadow Throne, Vexella's Praetor, sorta covered in Shadow Throne. The banner's abilities were, and I believe they're all the same. Some of the stats are slightly different, but you are taking them mainly for the banner, so I don't feel I'll cover them. It's mainly if they might get an extra attack or two, or I think it's an extra wound and attack they get. Vigilators, covered in Shadow Throne, Witch Seekers, covered in Shadow Throne, Anathema, Psykana, Rhinos, more or less the same, minus some wording in terms of how the transport works, but we know a Rhino, we know a Rhino. So let's have a look at some of the data sheets. Starting off with Trajann Valoris and Shield Captain on foot. Trajann is looking at 170 points, +1 wound, +1 attack, +1 leadership, and the Watcher's Axe in melee is now 3 damage, one of the few ways that we actually do get 3 damage. No 3-up invul, but ignore wounds on a 5+, so whether that's more useful or not, I don't know. Basically, you're giving up 16.6% survivability for maybe actually 33% more survivability, because I don't think he ignored wounds previously unless they were mortal. So I actually, in part, maybe agree that was maybe a bit more of an upgrade. Must be Warlord unless another unit has same ability. If full army is Custodes, except Psykana agents or unaligned, then receive 1 command point and your second Warlord trait. If you looked into Warlord traits, he had 2. You get the second one only if he is your Warlord. Custodes core units within 6 inches reroll hit and wound rolls of 1. In the moment shackle, once per battle, either fight again at the end of the fight phase, reduce damage of an attack to 0 after a failed saving throw, and after an enemy unit has fought. If this unit is eligible to fight, it can fight next. All okay abilities, there's no more of that returning the amount of command points. You know what, I'm actually thankful for it, because sometimes you forget it, sometimes you wouldn't, etc, etc. I think this fight again is quite nice, reducing the damage to 0. If you had something that hit really, really hard, you just go, nope, none of that. And if, you know, he hasn't fought yet, you can just essentially fight. Yeah, there's a lot of good abilities in that one. Is he worth 170 points though? Oh, debatable. I mean, yeah, I could see potential. I definitely could see potential. Shield Captain on foot, this is called the Guardian one, which is 110 points, +1 wounds, +1 attack, +2 leadership. Reroll effects, core units only, and Presidium Shield, it's not called a Storm Shield anymore, add 1 to saving throws. Shield Captain on Dawneagle and Valerian. So the Shield Captain on Dawneagle Jetbike, let's face it, was a staple in many Custodes armies, is now 170 points, +5 for Salvo Launcher, and it has +2 wounds, bring it to 9, and +1 attack, +2 leadership. Salvo Launcher is range 24, heavy 1, strength 8, -4 AP, damage D3 +3, so you're giving up the sort of ability to then fire flak, and I think the reroll wounds if it was a vehicle. for this more solid damage of D3 plus 3. Now, that's a bit of a tricky one. The reroll wounds really did make a lot more, you know, if you're targeting anything that was strength 8, I think the reroll wounds might have actually been better. But maybe not on that side. I would have to do the math on that one. Part of me is saying actually maybe the D3 plus 3 just means more reliable damage. Yeah, I'm probably going to say D3 plus 3 versus rerolling is actually more reliable, but again, people with maths hammers will probably work that one out better. The Inceptor Lance is melee, plus 2 strength, minus 3 AP, 2 damage. If this unit charged, performed heroic intervention, add 1 to the wound rolls. Again, people are going to work out, is this better than rerolling or not? Part of me says it's probably going to be, because if you were to charge something that was a bit heavier and you were wounding on 5s versus now you're wounding on 4s, but you could have rerolled all the 1 to 4s anyway, it's a bit more questionable on that side as well, but there have been major changes on that one. The reroll affects core only. We then have Valerian, which is 140 points, movement 6, weapon skill plus skill 2+, strength and toughness 5, wound 7, attack 6, leadership 11, and save 2+. Genosis is range 24, rapid fire 1, strength 4, minus 1 AP, 2 damage, melee plus 2, melee, in melee it's melee plus 2, AP minus 4, 2 damage. In melee, it prevents models from ignoring wounds inflicted by it, so I mean you don't see that as often as you used to, in case he gets stuck in a fight with Mortarion, and frankly Mortarion will probably throw him about. Then he also has Miscordia to fight with as well. We then have the standard Captain reroll, and then he's also got the Hero of Lionsgate, unmodified wound rolls of 1 to 3, fail to wound Valerian. That might hold up, you know, Mortarion for a while, but he could go into the huge amount of attacks to possibly bring him down. But then we also have the Goals and Laurels, which is once per battle round you can reroll a single hit, wound, charge roll, or saving throw for this model. So that's where the old Victor of the Blood games went. It'd be ideal if we still had it, but appears it is on Valerian. Coming to Aleya Knight-Centura, Aleya is 75 points, movement 7, weapon skill bliss skill 2+, strength and toughness 3, wounds 5, attacks 5, leadership 9, and a 3+ save. Simonas is a melee weapon, strength 3, AP minus 3, and 2 damage, also has a Miscordia. Has the Cadre Tactics aura, which is reroll wound rolls of 1 for Psykana core units, Void Sheen Cloak for 5 up invul, and Tenacious Spirit, which fight first, if destroyed before fighting, may fight before being removed, which is quite a nice model for 75 points. Knight-Centura, which is 50 points, movement 7, weapon skill bliss skill 2+, strength and toughness 3, wounds 5, attacks 4, leadership 9, and a 3+ save. It can have the standard sort of weapons that you see with a lot of the Sister of Silence, but it does have a master-crafted bolt gun if you go down that route, which is range 24, rapid fire 1, strength 4, AP minus 1, and damage 2. Cadre Tactics aura, reroll wound rolls of 1 for Psykana core units, and Void Sheen Cloak for 5 up invul. Next we have the Custodian Guard and Wardens, and this is probably a surprising one that they haven't really changed that much. So Custodian Guard is 45 points, leadership 11, and that's the only change really in their stat line. As for weapons, I feel we've seen them all in terms of previews and everything, but the Presidium Shield is +1 armor save. Now, I'm going to say on this one, I think a lot has maybe changed in this one. I think the sword and board has a lot of potential, just having that extra. I believe the sword now does a lot more damage, a lot more potential in it, and the extra armor is very, very useful. And when it comes to the Wardens, the axes are incredibly useful. For the spears, I just can't work out the use for them. I know that the spears are kind of bringing you to, I think, strength 7, versus the blade brings you strength 6, but they kind of do both the same thing. I think strength 7 is not the most ideal. There's a few vehicles you're going for, but really if you want to get somewhere you would need to get strength 8. I think, and I've said this a few times where I was going to talk about the spears, I think the spears were a very, very big missed opportunity. They should have maybe been the same strength as the Sentinel blades, made them strength 6, but they would have a sweeping attack, which would be something like strength user minus 1 AP, 1 damage, but it gave you an extra like 3 attacks per 1. And this would represent that the sword and board should have been defensive, the axe, which is more in the Wardens, should have been for hard hitting, and the blade, the spear was mainly for sweeping, as in if you faced against a horde-based army, then yeah, you could sweep and absolutely slice them apart. Maybe not give them an extra 3 attacks, maybe give them an extra 1 or 2 or something. But you get my point, is that the spear, the only difference really between it and Sentinel Blade is that it does a bit more, has a bit more range in terms of its firing capability, and in combat's +1 strength, I think it really should have been a sweeping attack option for it as well, and we would have seen 3 different ways to field the sort of melee weapons, and I really feel that's a missed opportunity, and I feel that throughout the Codex when it comes to the actual Guardian Spear. Next up to Custodian Wardens, which are 50 points, Leadership 11, again that's kind of it. Binding Oath is same as before, ignore wounds on a 6+, which I really don't... If you're going to give ignore wounds, make them 5, don't make them 6. If you have to pay extra points to make them 5+, then go for it. But 6 only gives you 16.6% chance of ignoring that wound, so, it's really not the best. It can help, but it's not ideal in my mind. Then you have Watchman, which is friendly shield host characters within 3 inches, cannot be targeted by ranged attacks. That is really, you already have the lookout kind of star rule on that. I really don't rate it so high. I really love the Custodian Wardens, and frankly sometimes I use their models instead of Guard because they just look so much better. But again, I feel when it comes to these 2 units, something feels missing. And lastly, I'm going to speak about the Venerable Contemptor Dread and Vertus Praetor. So the wounds are down to 9 for the Contemptor Dread, no longer brackets, which is okay. Attacks 5, Leadership 11, Atomic Shieldings 5 up Pinball, Unyielding Ancient, ignore wounds on 6s, Guardian to 10-0, subtract 1 damage to a minimum of 1, explodes in a 6, and everyone in 6 inches suffers D3 mortal wounds. Let's face it, we were all taking different Dreadnoughts than these, we weren't really bothered by this one. But I thought it'd be worth to mention there's a few changes because it's gone down a wound, so it doesn't bracket, which makes it a little bit more reliable. However, we do care about the Vertus Praetors, which its wounds have gone up by 1, bringing it to 5. Really, I think it should have been 6. Leadership 11, no one's really that bothered by, but yep, braver than a robot. 85 points and +5 for Salvo Launchers. Salvo Launchers, again I said before, are range 24, heavy 1, strength 8, AP -4, and damage D3 +3. The Scepter Lance, melee, strength +2, AP -3 and 2 damage. The Scepter Lance also, if this unit charged or performed a heroic intervention, adds 1 to wound rolls. And Implacable Vanguard is the same, and they are, thankfully, core units, so you can get all the lovely buffs that they can benefit from, because if they didn't, then this would really hurt them quite hard. And that is it for my Custodes. So our first impressions look at the Codex. Ultimately, what do I think? Well, when you start joking about Codex creep, someone's got to end the trend, and Custodes might be that. I mean, a lot of the things kind of worked with Custodes, even with their old Codex. Now, we'll see how this plays out. Ultimately, I think the shield hosts are a fantastic addition. It brings a different way to play each time, and you've got to think tactically about that. But removing some of the key stratagems, I think, was a really not a great way to go about it, and I think some of the data sheets could have been changed up a wee bit as well. Ultimately, I think what a lot of the problem with Custodes is that a huge part of their Codex is in Forge World. If it wasn't for Forge World, Custodes would be in a really dire place, and sometimes the stratagems don't take it into account. I also feel that sometimes Games Workshop want to just make sure Custodes don't have all the stats in the world so they can become unreal, but with that I feel like sometimes they just don't feel as threatening as they should be. There's just far too much 2 damage in this, far too much 2 damage, and there isn't ways to sometimes improve their stats as much as Space Marines. I know there's plenty of ways to buff Space Marines, like they get far more attacks than the average Custodes, and maybe they may not hit as well, but there's plenty of ways to buff them, and Custodes just don't feel quite as, on first impression, they get as much utility as that. So there is a bit of disappointment on that side as well, but ultimately Custodes, they feel a wee bit of the same, but there is also a little bit of trepidation when I do look at the Codex, and I think that's just over small changes here and there that do worry me. But ultimately, we'll see how it comes out. I just don't look at it and go, wow, this really covers the areas that I think that the Custodes needed to improve on. And largely I believe that the Custodes needed to improve on is not just their rules, which needed a bit of a tidying up, but they do need more units. Forge World does help in a lot of ways, but when the Codex, which a lot of players sometimes see, not many of them can, some of them can't afford Forge World because it's exceedingly expensive. Certain areas in the world it's hugely expensive, the flyers are excruciatingly expensive. Then they are looking at the units within Codex, and when you're looking at a Venerable Land Raider, which is just, or even the Dreadnought from there, they were thrown in terms of a time when it was 7th edition and they had that box set. But really, Custodes using a Land Raider, it just doesn't feel right to me. Forge World answers a lot, but really I want to see them maybe think about expanding the Custodes range. There's a difference of some armies in 40k at the moment don't need new rules, they need new units. And then there's some armies that need new rules and definitely don't need new units. And there's a big judgment between what, and some need both. But there's a big juggle between those two, and it's very, very interesting. So yeah, that is it for Custodes. What do people think? I've seen a lot of trepidation about this, and I think the Damage 2 part certainly answers that. And I just feel, yeah, maybe there is a few lost opportunities here, and we'll see how it plays out. So thanks again, please comment, share, like and subscribe, very interested to hear what people have to say, and we'll see you on our Tabletop Assault Battle Report.